we are thrilled to have you all here with us today. So as Candace said, I've been here about coming up on 13 years now. Prior to that, I was an elementary teacher in Denver Public Schools, and I've been here on the Texas team for about 7 years. Andrew, you want to add anything from your end?
I've been here about 20 years, so you can ask me anything. Let's roll.
Yeah, great. And so I feel like when I typed your hosts, that was a placeholder for what we would say on that opening slide, but we're going to be your hosts. So we're excited to get going. I just want to add as a note, Andrew's team, the data science team, they're coming up with all these incredible ways to look at ST Math growth and progress, and me being mostly, district facing out in schools all the time. We don't always get a chance to work together, but it's been a real pleasure to collaborate. And I love when we get the opportunity to talk through how we can help y'all understand what ST Math is doing for your kids, what it's able to do for your kids. So we're excited to get going here.
So I'm going to say that a lot of times when you're sharing a story about anything, you tend to get a favorite thing to talk about, one aspect of it that becomes your kind of go-to. And in this talk, we want to give you several more aspects, and some of this talk is brand new. So like nobody's quite talking about ST Math the way that we're going to show you some ways to talk about its unique value. And so it's kind of like, I think to the Wizard of Oz, and kind of coming from Kansas, where back in the 1930s, that was black and white film, and then brand new. Garrett, if you could advance, we want to move into that Technicolor of lots of different new aspects, colorings, flavorings, lyrics, even of arriving in the land of Oz, but just a lot more parts of the story that you can see it in the kids, but this is going to be more ways to powerfully tell it.
And so one of the things that we thought about going into this, we called it tools for storytelling. We were kind of thinking about the folks who are here probably fall into one of two main categories. Many of you are here because you have ST Math. You already use it in your campus or your district. It is something that you believe in. It's something that you feel like is a really great tool for your students and your teachers. And then probably a smaller subset, some of the folks who are here are actually probably trying to bring ST Math into their school or district. And so we wanted to make sure that regardless of, the ST Math story you had to tell, whoever your audience is, for that first group, it's entirely possible you're having a conversation right now about why it makes sense to keep ST Math in place. You may have some other folks in your district or school who are thinking there may be a better solution that's more aligned to what your students need. And then for those of you who are trying to bring it, you're probably looking for really compelling reasons to make the case for ST Math. And so we're hoping that, as you see on the right there, those kind of different light bulbs go off. We're going to show you some things that hopefully will just spark ideas for you in a way that you can help tell your ST Math story, and then kind of take what you see here today. You're not going to walk away with a script, but what we're hoping for is you walk away with some ideas, and then we're happy to work with you moving forward to ensure that you're able to tell the compelling ST Math story that you need to. So we also want to add an additional, and this saying, it came out of my own personal habits. So I listen to a lot of sports podcasts when I'm doing yard work or driving, to pick up my kids or at the gym or whatever. And there's a really popular phrase right now in that sports podcasting world, referring to a player as they are one of one. And what that essentially means is that a player whose impact and excellence is actually so unique that you don't compare them to anyone else. They are simply one of one. There's nothing else like them. There's no point on even comparing them to anyone else. And I like it because it's a mathematical term, and that was my favorite thing to teach when I was a teacher. But also, I think it's really applicable to ST Math, and we want to help you understand, as you're talking about ST Math and presenting your ST Math story, how you can help folks understand that if you're getting down to the impact ST Math has on student achievement, on real mathematical learning, and then really also the emotions that students attach to math, you can't actually really compare STMath to anything else. So hopefully you come away from this with a little better understanding of why. We're essentially saying STMath is the Michael Jordan of supplemental math programs, and we're ready to back that up.
Yeah, and we're making a pretty bold claim that in the STMath learning environment, all of the children see themselves as math people.
Yep.
All right, so this is what we're going to cover in the next 30 odd minutes. And so not to just read the bullets, but I'll read the bullets. We're going to talk, yes, about the high stakes assessment. We're going to talk about what's different about the way that STMath does studies. We're going to put the spotlight on usage for a minute, because a lot of times that spotlight is missing from comparative program types of situations. We're going to talk about not one, not two, but 3 types of equity that STMath uniquely provides, and we'll talk some about why. And again, this is stories that we hope you can see in the program after listening. And when you're telling a story, you can focus somebody like watching kids in a classroom or whatever. Then we're going to talk about beyond those high stakes assessments, and finally, a word about video games. So, high stakes studies, everybody's got one, right? And I tell people all the time, don't try to compete on what's the biggest number ever seen on one high stakes study. And I say, which is true, that it's possible to kind of rig that game some and cherry pick. And it was 10 years ago on a different program version, not on the same state tests and stuff. So I just want to make this pretty objective claim that our study strategy is different from get some big number and there you go, or get a green check mark and there you go. So we'll unpack this a bit, but we think it's fair for you to ask when you're and tell people about STMath when you're evaluating a program. Well, what did it show on other assessments? How about my assessment? What about any student group? How about any year? How about last year? Any kind of math content? What about low, medium, and high usage amounts? So we're going to unpack a little bit of how the way we do the studies, not some height of some column bar on the study, is very important for you to assess how's this doing in my district, or how might this do in my district.
So we recently were able to wrap up a 3-year longitudinal study here in the state of Texas. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, I'm based here in Austin, Texas. And one thing that's really exciting for me is that when I moved here 7 years ago, we essentially had 2 districts in Texas using STMath and maybe about 55 schools. And over the last 7 years, we've been able to grow that impact to earlier this year, there were almost 3,000 elementary schools using STMath. And so GG is everywhere in Texas. And there's probably a lot of you who know that because you're here from Texas right now. But beyond just simply getting STMath into the hands of more students, which is kind of my personal mission, it's why I've been here as long as I have and why I left the classroom. What has been really exciting for me is that every year we have the opportunity to analyze state level assessment data. And every year it seems to get better. And so we're going to present a little bit of the findings of this statewide assessment of STMath that we recently shared with our state education agency called the Texas Education Agency, TEA. But also we were able to look at a lot of subgroups of students and different student populations, and also some really interesting other lenses to look at the growth data. And so to paint a little bit of the picture, just so you understand the students we were looking at here. I've got the words animated out so you can kind of follow along. So the reason we're doing it this way, and the reason I'm kind of walking you through slowly, is that the representation of this data is probably unlike any you've seen before. So I just want to make sure you have a good handle of who we're talking about before you actually see the impact. And so what we did was we looked at all Texas students using STMath who had collected an average of 1,000 puzzles per year for each year that they were in grade 3, 4, or 5. So 3 school years in a row. So the students we were looking at and analyzing were essentially students who averaged, I think Andrew, what's the term we call 1,000 puzzles? It's not necessarily even high usage. It's how do you classify that?
I would call that kind of a mid. It's between what I
Yeah.
call nominal, which is 750, and high would be 1,500, let's say.
Yeah. And if you're not in the weeds of what is 1,000 puzzles in ST Math mean, essentially most student grade level content is going to cover around 2,200 to maybe 2,500 puzzles. So even this 1,000 puzzle uh, uh, kind of bar we wanted to get here, this is really only about half or a little less of the content for the grade level for students. So we looked at those kind of parameters for the study, and what we came up with was we had about 3,000 students, a little bit over that, where we had this data for all 3 school years. In Texas, we have 4 different um, kind of measurement levels for how students do on our state assessment, which they take every year in the spring. It goes from did not meet grade level standards to approaches to meets to masters. So however, you probably have a similar kind of a categorization in your state, but that's what Texas is. And so what you're looking at here is the bar all the way on the left represents the students and how they scored in grade 3. Obviously, what we're looking at there is a higher level of did not meet approaches than we really like to see. And as you follow to the right there, we call this the alluvials chart. What you'll see is that every individual student in the data set has their own line that follows their score from 21 to their score to 22 and then their score to 23. So you'll notice if there's a lot of students who stayed in a particular band there, like let's say students who stayed at the master's level, kind of just go straight across. You'll see some students who maybe drop down a proficiency level that particular year. But generally what we want to see with this, visualization of the data is we want to see more kids moving from the lower on the left to the next category up on the right. And what you'll see here is that we're seeing what we really want, which is over those 3 years, the students who were not meeting grade level standards shrunk from 20% of all those students all the way down to 3. And the students who were scoring approaches also shrank significantly from almost 30% down to 15%. So like I said, this was particularly exciting for me, given that this was the culmination of a 3-year project here in Texas, where all students had access to ST Math through the state education agency. But thinking about those students who really needed this additional support, those kids over on the left in the orange and yellow there, seeing that number really shrink and seeing that nice master's category really grow to about half of all these students scoring at the master's level in the 5th grade. That's really exciting for me, because personally what that means is that they're not going to have the math experience I had, which was I was a straight A math student all the way through elementary school. And then when I got to algebra in 8th grade, I was failing and I got kicked out. And it's because my teacher said to me, and I'll never forget this, don't worry about it, you're not a math person. And it was a very confusing thing for me, because my whole life I had been told I was a math person, and my whole life I had been getting A's in math. And what the actual issue for me was that I was really good at memorizing things in elementary school. So memorize my times tables. If a teacher said, here's how you solve this kind of problem or get the answer to this kind of question, I could always remember what you were supposed to do. But when I got to algebra, I fell apart, because I couldn't reason mathematically. I couldn't think mathematically. All I could do was remember how someone told me how to solve a kind of problem and repeat it. So what's really exciting about this and is personal for me is that I know that these kids who are scoring meets to masters in 5th grade are not going to have that same experience I had in middle school, because they're coming in with this incredibly rigorous and really comprehensive understanding of the elementary standards that they're going to need to be successful. So that's the whole picture. And we understand also that your kids may not look like the kids in Texas. They may come from different backgrounds. They may speak different languages. And so we totally recognize that your student population is unique from pretty much everyone else's. Like, everybody's looking at a different group of students. And we understand that. So we make sure that we look at all different situations, all different backgrounds, large groups of students, small groups. And we were able to do that in Texas because it's a large, diverse state. And we were still able to kind of hone in on smaller student populations, but still have those treatment groups be really high. And so One of the things I want to kind of spark for you, and maybe there may not be that many of you that have to think about what are my rural students like and what are my big city students like, because you probably don't have a huge mix of both. But hopefully what this is showing here is that if you're thinking about different student populations, what are this kids' backgrounds like? What are their socioeconomic status? Kind of where do they live? What kind of resources? Do they have fast internet? Like all these different things, no matter who these students are, we're seeing these same kind of results. We're moving those kids from that, did not meet approaches. We're increasing those students, getting those up to that meets master's level. We're also able to look at what is the impact of STMath for students who are using a particular core curriculum. So there's an OER that's provided by the state of Texas that many of our students use because the state provides it. They provide it alongside STMath. So we were able to see these same trends hold true for even these districts that had adopted a totally new core curriculum, which I think most of y'all know, if you've done that before, you typically see a pretty big dip in that first year. Andrew, this is something we've never really looked at before. Did you have any additional comments on the Eureka group here?
Just here's one of those firsts that we haven't presented out before about with a big enough sample, you can start to pick out, a basal that's getting supplemented and the value add from having the supplement. So yeah, this is a 2024 first.
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, I didn't mention before. So our mission as an organization is that we want to equip we want to mathematically equip all students to solve the world's most challenging problems. When we say all students, we mean all students. So one of the things we really want to make sure of is that STMath is not just having an impact on a particular group of students, like ones who are kind of testing right around proficiency, and we're just able to push them over the line, or kids who look a certain way or speak a certain language. So when we dove into that data, we were able to demonstrate that regardless of a student's ethnicity or background or primary language at home or socioeconomic status, we were seeing these same data trends across all those student groups. And what you'll notice here also is that in this particular graph that's representing Black students in Texas who use STMath with fidelity at that 1500 puzzle level, it's mirroring those same trends of moving students out of meets masters and up into approaches up to meets and masters. This is actually a single year, so the growth doesn't look as dramatic as the first one I showed you, but this is just with 1 year of STMath fidelity. And also, I didn't want to confuse you on the first slide by having so many of those alluvials, but we always make sure that we're looking at a treatment group alongside a control group. So what's represented here is actually the comparison between a control group of students who did not have STMath, and the students on the right there you see is a much more dramatic gain. And actually, what's kind of dismaying is the control group students, the percentage of those students actually increased who were scoring did not meet on the state level. So while the trend was headed in the wrong direction for students not using STMath, you can see we were making a really positive impact there. And a little bit of a repeat, so I'm not going to talk all the way through, but essentially if we're looking at emergent bilingual students using STMath, you may call them English learners in your state. In Texas, we refer to them as emergent bilingual students. Same trend here, and we're going to get a little bit into a little later on why we see this level of impact with this particular population of students, but again, kind of mirrors those same overall trends of we're moving kids kind of up and to the right.
Thanks, Garrett. So in short, we study all the students and those situations on the ground. So here we were focusing on one state test, but we put a study out about 5 years ago that had, I think it was 14 states and 11 different state tests. We've evaluated way over 30 different states with their assessment. We also do third-party assessments, the beginning of year, middle of year, end of year type of situation, different grade level bands, high, medium, low performance school groups. Of course, we're putting out our most recent stuff from 22-23 or even by now 23-24 school year. You're not going to find all of this stuff right at your fingertips on our website or with your own research. And so we encourage you, particularly after seeing this, and I saw something in the chat already, like if there's something that you would like for your situation, just reach out to your education success representative or your partnerships representative, and I know where they all are. Garrett? So these studies that we've been showing so far are largely, they are from before any STMath to during STMath use. And so like, what was it at performance at whatever mix of other competitor products were being used, and then you get STMath, and what's the change in a rigorous study. But there's another kind of study situation is, well, once you've adopted STMath, what about year to year? Like, what about from first year 1 to year 2, or for that matter, what about even from year 9 to year 10? We're going to make the claim and unpack here a little bit that each and every year, whether it's year 1 to 2 or year 9 to 10, that every year STMath is providing that support, like pillars of support for that accelerated or upgraded STMath powered level of performance. Like these pillars are holding up this this roof here. And so Garrett, next slide, please. One way that we test this claim is we look at, and this is kind of the inverse of how people usually look at from before a program to doing a program. We look at, well, what happens if you pull those pillars away? What happens if, unfortunately, a district chooses to switch out STMath for something else? And so what you see here on this chart is on the left is that before any STMath, and then in the middle is the bump for with the STMath holding things up during STMath. And so that's higher percentile or percent of students meeting standards or scale score points added or what have you. That's the middle. But then we followed those districts who several years ago, whenever that was, switched out STMath, and we were like, what happened after STMath was gone? Like when you pulled that support back, did the math performance go back down? And in fact, that's what that right-hand dot shows. It's sad, but true, that it did. So that's one way we know that even in year 9, let's say, STMath is providing that support. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and I like to point out on this slide also that the N there, we always try to put the N next to a graph just to let you know how many kids we're talking. That's 526 grade levels, not 526 students. So what that's actually looking at is 526 different grade level cohorts of an entire grade level worth of students. So the data here is not 500 kids, it's well into the tens or hundreds of thousands.
So that's kind of like, this is a bit ghoulish, but that's kind of like a post-mortem, like it's too late. Although we're super thrilled when we get some of those districts back, and I can give a shout out to a couple of my faves, Cypher and Killeen, coming back. But for those continuing on, there's a question of, you know, Andrew, you're making this claim, you showed this postmortem, you're saying that year 9, there's still support happening. You know, I want to do that now. Can I do that? And the answer is yes. So we have generated, and Garrett, I invite you to jump in about how this is being used and received. But in my data science team, we've generated a way to look at the usage in your district, the most recent year or even semester, on whatever assessment. A summative assessment could be state, could be these, you know, 3 times a year third-party assessments. And we evaluate based on matching students and modeling those who got a lot of STMath, a mid amount, a low amount. As long as we have that spread, we can come out with what is the value of doing more or less STMath in your district, the way you used it with your students. You don't have to be a high user even. We will run, if with a data shared, impact rate report, and we come back with, sometimes they call it the bang for the buck, but it's like the math learning for the minutes invested. And we come back with a number that we'll share back with you and walk through with you. And it's a pretty significant kind of a number. So we're able to do that even in our most senior districts who've been with us, coming up on 20 years now. We can show what happened in year 19. Garrett, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I love this this report in particular for districts, because I think a lot of times what I hear working with all the districts and school leaders that I do is you can kind of eyeball and a lot of principals that go, oh well, I know my ST math class, the ones that are doing it more, like we see that we can kind of correlate that just from like sort of looking at the data. What this report really does is it attaches an exact number. So SBAC is a different kind of state assessment. Here in Texas, we have STAR, and so we can actually tell you how many STAR scale score points your students benefited from each kind of segments of how much ST math they did that year. We could do it with RIT, NWA map scores. We can do it with kind of the other, more popular third-party assessments. So essentially, as long as we have 2 data points, we can tell you the impact ST math had for your students. And that can be really powerful because we can show the impact it's had for a big number of students somewhere else. Maybe it's even in your state, but a lot of folks want to know, well, what did it do for my kids? That's what I really care about. What did it do last semester? What did it do last year? And so that is something that we are able to provide, with a couple extra steps as far as sharing that student level test data with us.
So we are owning that you need to use to get the math learning, and we're telling you how much is a level of usage, whether that's 750 puzzles or the 1,000 that you saw before or 1,500. And we're saying that more usage, which means covering more standards and that way of understanding it for kids that they make sense of, the visual way. So more usage covering more standards is more math learning. So usage, but you ought to be hearing, how do you get more usage as well? Like, what if our usage, we want to move up to that next level? So we do that. And Garrett, if you could advance. And keep going with the, if there's animation there it is. So a thing about ST Math that I want to show you in the next couple of slides is that it actually empowers the students to drive the usage to where, and I don't want to minimize, but if I were kind of the adult in charge of just one thing to get usage to happen in my school or district or classroom, I would say, well, I want to get the students to log in regularly, to use regularly, kind of like going to the gym, like get in a cadence. You go every week, you don't skip weeks. And so what we find, if you get the students to go one or maybe 2 times a week, but don't skip weeks, they think this is fun and they'll put in the time. And if we can go to the next slide, please, Garrett. We actually can provide that relationship, bottom line, kids love the games challenge. Well, one way to look at it, and you can look at it at your own district, especially data, when there's big enough data sets, is what this line is showing is on the x-axis is how regular are the students going, and off to the far right is they never skip a week. So that's 100% weekly attendance. But then the y-axis is for those kids, and the size of the bubble is a number of kids. This is like real data from a real district. For those kids, how many minutes average per week that they go are they seeing, depending on their regularity? And so way off at the far right, we see this, what we want to see, the bigger dots are on the far right. Kids are going regularly. They go more weeks and they put in more minutes per week. So it's like a double whammy of getting the total minutes, the total puzzles, the standards covered, and the math learning up. So that's fairly new also, and it had better be that the kids like what they're doing. I mean, I know sometimes I hear these stories, this gets used as a reward, right? So with regularity comes even more intensity of use by the kids. Garrett?
Yeah, and so if you're not a data scientist and you don't think of things in terms like with attendance bins, we want to make it really easy for you to say, are my kids going enough? And are they averaging enough minutes? So this is a report that's available on demand, and we just pulled it for a school. And essentially what we're able to provide for you is a really easy snapshot of just like that top bar is our kids logging in every week, or most of the weeks, and that's the green ones, and then you're able to see like what percentage of your kids are not really getting there, and then the next bar down is just how many weeks are they attending, or I'm sorry, how many minutes are they averaging per week. And so when we visualize this data, when we provide it to school and district leaders, we try to make it super easy to look at a snapshot and say, okay, who's going? Are they going often enough? Are they spending enough time on ST Math? And then these are the first two bar graphs that appear on this report. But if you were a school or district administrator looking at this, then in the following, we would actually have breakdowns by grade level and by individual class and teacher. So again, this is just data that is available to you simply on demand. And we're happy to provide it because this is the kind of information you need to kind of drive that increase in usage at your campus.
Yeah, and whether it looks great or not so great, I was half joking but mostly serious with Garrett. I was like, I wish my gym would give me something like this, but what if it didn't look so great? They don't want to give me that feedback because what they really want is it's not about me getting fit, it's about me renewing my license with them. And so, my gym would never show me this, but what we're serious about is the math learning and accelerating things. So whether it's lots of green or lots of room to improve, that's what we're going to show y'all.
Yeah, you either have something to celebrate or something to work towards too. And we just presented this to a couple different groups of principals, and they found it super helpful.
So I mentioned 3 types of equity, and so I'm going to claim that when you're watching ST Math in action and you're going to share with somebody like, what's this doing for kids? Here's 3 aspects of equity that you can share. The first one I'm going to handle. Second one is Garrett. I think third one's me again. But just on the face of it, I'm imagining telling that story to, one of those light bulb, hopefully people on the right. And we're looking at the program, and just by face value of looking what the user interface is like, we've eliminated barriers. It provides unmatchable access. You don't have to be language fluent or even speak English to show off your brilliance. And you have this very simple, I want to say low cognitive load later, but you don't even have very much of a math prerequisite in order to engage with this low floor. So that's a kind of everybody gets to access the same level of program regardless type of thing that I think is unmatched in the field. Garrett?
Yeah, and this is really this slide is actually probably a 2-hour presentation if we dove into the neuroscience and all of the things that go into this. But it's just a single slide here. But this is really the why behind some of those earlier graphs we showed of as we were looking at that impact on the Texas state assessments, why they all look the same, why it's always those students are moving from the does not meet in the approaches categories up to meets and masters. The next one is called production equity. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, Andrew had a typo. He meant productive equity, because we talk a lot about productive struggle in ST Math. Productive is a word that we use a lot. And then as I was thinking about it, what I realized is that it's a really powerful thing about ST Math. And the reason we use the word production equity here is that every single student who is in ST Math, it's mastery based, it's self-paced, but no matter who you are building the same exact amount of math understanding as every other kid in the classroom as you move through the curriculum. And I think that's really powerful because it means that your gifted, talented students, they have to achieve the exact same amount of puzzle mastery to move to the next level, to the next objective, as your students with IEPs or your students who are still working on maybe math below grade level. So the ability for students to essentially collect, if you think of math understanding at grade level as individual bricks and they're building a pyramid of math understanding, every single one of your kids is collecting and building the same amount of bricks in ST Math.
And this one won't take too much unpacking. Each one of those columns from left to right, if you can't quite read it, is a different student subgroup. That's everything that we got. Again, this is that Texas data set. So this is every race, ethnicity, and subgroup that had a good sample size there, everything, gifted, sped, uh, disadvantage, etc. And so this is impact measured in terms of effect size. So it doesn't matter whether you're a low or mid or high performer, all that is taken into account. And this is unmatched. I've never seen anything else like this. So this, like when we talk a lot about being designed for how the brain learns, and this is the kind of impact you should see. And so we're very happy to report out on this always. Usually you'll just see that one column with all students together, but this isn't something you see with your eyes so much in the classroom as more, derivative of looking at scores. However, sometimes when we have a huge sample, we can break this out on that impact rate study, like for your students in your district as well. Garrett, we probably need to shift into second gear here. So
I think we gotta, we'll move a little more quickly. And
Yep.
I think we spent, as we were working through this, we wanted to talk a lot about the impact on student achievement, just because we know for some of y'all that's top of mind, particularly this time of year. It's kind of the thing that you may be measured on your own effectiveness as an administrator or decision maker. And so just a little bit into why, the reason that we're seeing that same effect size, that same impact on all these different student groups is that essentially, the way most programs work is that they are teaching kids how to answer a certain kind of math question. They're getting a lot of practice of a certain assessment item type, or multiple choice or lots of word problems. STMath is the only program that's actually designed to build students' ability to mathematically reason. And so it doesn't matter if they're taking an exit, or if they're working on exit ticket or a unit assessment, or they're on that high stakes state assessment. Since we're not teaching kids how to answer math questions, we're allowing them to build the ability to reason mathematically and create their own understanding. That's why we're able to see these same levels of impact across all different students. It really is the approach in the way that STMath is built and the way that students engage with it, which is based on that 25 years of neuroscience research. It is essentially by design. It is supposed to work that way for all students, and that's what the data really bears out. But we know that there's other reasons why you may think STMath is the right fit for your kids beyond how it helps them achieve on the assessment. So we want to spend the last part kind of talking through some of those other aspects.
Yep. The high stakes stuff is the high stakes stuff, and we're always after more than that. And so this is the more than that, and even to the extent of what's math for anyhow. And sometimes I think that from a student perspective, maybe for Garrett, after it wasn't straight A's anymore, it was about, well, how many more years do I have to have before I don't have to do this anymore? Like survival, like getting through the year kind of thing. But we want to say that STMath is not, that the whole purpose of what math is for is part of the story that you can tell out of kids using STMath. So go ahead, Garrett. What you can see, next slide, for when, not that one, sorry. There you go. It's not just the X's and the Y's. There are things that you can see students doing, whether they're in pre-K or in 8th grade, that are very general, kind of lifelong problem-solving skills. So they're doing, and you can see it, they're doing this pattern recognition. They have to make sense of stuff. It's non-routine. There aren't instructions. They're to eventually pass a level, they have to make it make sense to them. And how do I do this? Which happens to be standards, rigorous math standards. They're doing problem solving. They're having to show a lot of perseverance. They're doing self-belief. So like the purpose of the math wasn't just to get the score or get the right answer or even make the teacher happy, or that you're going to be doing X's and Y's so much in your future. It's that you're going to get to be like a black belt in all of this kind of stuff. And you can see even in a little kid doing STMath that it's not just about getting that one right answer. Garrett?
Yeah, and there are other programs that claim to build a love of math for students, and generally what those programs do, and we're not going to name names, is essentially say, hey, if you solve enough of these boring math problems, you get to shoot aliens or race cars or zap your friends because you're a wizard. And so what STMath actually does, and this is the reason we have these quotes up here, is this is actually from a peer-reviewed journal published study that was not us. So the researchers are down there on the bottom. As far as we can tell, and we make this claim with the caveat that you might be able to find a study, we haven't been able to. STMath is the only program that has actually been proven by independent research to increase students' ability or increase students' own self-belief and their ability to do math. And the result of that directly was that as those kids built that additional self-belief in their own ability to do math, it increased their student achievement. And in that particular study, it actually had a higher effect size for the students who had lower math achievement scores going into it. So we are actually changing how kids feel about their own ability to do math. And as Andrew kind of touched on, we want to make sure that kids have a different path than I did. And he's absolutely right. I took the minimum of math in high school. And then when I got to college, I majored in history because I could take the history of math instead of an actual math class. So I did become afraid of math as a student. And what we're trying to do is essentially prevent other students from having that kind of experience.
So now, and for sake of time, almost literally a few words about video game. And the short version of this is I was told by a former Secretary of Education for a very large state in the United States. In the early 2000s, I was told, don't talk about STMath as a game. Don't use that word game. That's like a 4-letter word that people think negatively about that. And it's 2024 now, and we're just owning that, yeah, STMath is a video game. It's not only okay, but behind that little visual there shows that only video game mechanics features can lead to the benefits in the upper right for all the different student groups in the lower right. So it had better be a video game. Next. Again, imagine you're looking at the kids playing this video game and telling a story to somebody. So don't forget to put the little colors from the palette onto your picture of Gigi or whatever. There aren't any instructions by design. We got rid of all the abstractions, at least at first, and even English language words, word problems, never mind symbols. That's all abstractions compared to concretes manipulated on the screen. They're getting the continuous feedback every time they pose a problem, just like in an entertainment video game. Like every time they're right or wrong, they can learn. And the game allows this very gradual scaffolding where even students 2 grades below can get started with the game. And it gets so challenging, we know as adults, like it's hard for us to do a game. The gifted and talented students are going to get challenged and struggle too, but through one at a time incremental steps. Garrett? Also, just to double underline, there's no hints solving it for you. Oh, this is too hard for you. We're going to put you in a lower grade level, automatically from the game. It requires mastery, and you need to, in order to move on, you have to solve the challenge that's in front of you. And I guess I want to say, what kind of pyramid of bricks, like Garrett was saying before, would it be okay that, oh, this brick's still a little squishy, but we ran out of time, like put it in there because we got to go on to the next brick. And the game allows you unlimited attempts, self-pace, every brick solid before the next brick gets put into place. Garrett? So I always credit Quentin Lawson with this. It was so profound, and he just said it in an offhand moment in 2009 when I was touring DC with the National Alliance of Black School Educators and presenting what this was about. And he just says, there's no achievement gap in video games, Andrew, and kind of keeps going. I'll let that speak for itself. Next.
Yeah, so the last thing is just, we talked a lot about the impact on student achievement, and then also the design of STMath and how it really is designed to be for all of your students and have that equal impact and on that math understanding. STMath is also really hard. It's designed to be challenging. Kids get stuck, they get frustrated. And so I want to do a quick thought exercise to help you also reflect on the emotional connection. So imagine you're a 3rd grader. You all year long are in front of your Chromebook twice a week for 45 minutes or 60 minutes. You're spending a lot of time on STMath. And it's the hardest thing that is out there for students. And when you get the question wrong, no teacher pops up and tells you the answer and does it for you. And when you ask your teacher in the room, she says, oh, sorry, I don't know how this game works. Like you figure it out and then you tell me, which is what we train teachers to do. And every time you get the question wrong, this little penguin runs across the screen, it goes bonk, and you get frustrated and you're like, oh, I just can't get that penguin across the screen. And so if I were a third grader and that penguin showed up in my school, I would be like, look, penguin, I've got some things to say to you because all year long, you've kind of been kicking my butt with these really hard questions. And so you would think that the reaction would be, I'm a little mad at you. And this is actually what it looks like. Can y'all hear the sound? Oh, no. Oh, well, that's probably good because
It's something like this. Yay, yay, yay.
So kids kind of just build this unusual personal emotional connection with ST Math. And that's just a little reminder of what the physical embodiment of Gigi showing up at their school after a year of struggling through the program can look like, and that joy and that kind of excitement. So we're a little over time. I know Andrew and I are happy to stick around and answer questions. And then just a reminder, everything we showed you today, we could do for your school. If you're like, I need that study for my kids, get in touch with us and we'll help you get that information into a slide deck or into a report that you need to share with folks. But thank you for coming. Hope to see y'all at the closing session.